What happens when an entire NFL city spends months doubting a rookie, only to watch him walk onto the field and make their whole narrative collapse in a single afternoon? That's exactly what just happened in Cleveland. For weeks, the Browns media machine pushed one storyline. Shedeur Sanders wasn't ready, wasn't liked, wasn't developing, and definitely wasn't the answer. Fans were told to trust the insiders, trust the depth chart, trust the whispers about his attitude. But the moment Shador finally got his chance, every one of those claims started falling apart, fast. Suddenly, the same reporters who said he couldn't even hold a football were calling him a field general. Analysts who claimed he needed a year on the bench were praising his leadership, his poise, and his accuracy. And teammates who supposedly didn't vibe with him were telling a completely different story, one filled with work ethic, positivity, and respect. Something didn't add up. How does a quarterback go from not ready for the moment to being mentioned alongside names like Tom Brady and Joe Burrow in the span of a few drives? How do insiders flip from criticism to admiration overnight unless something much deeper was influencing the story all along? Because this wasn't just a rookie proving himself. This was a rookie exposing the truth. And once people saw what Shedeur Sanders really looks like on an NFL field, the lies, the rumors, and the agendas didn't just crack, they shattered. The shift didn't happen gradually. It didn't build over weeks or even days. It hit Cleveland like a wave, fast, loud, and impossible to ignore. One moment, Shedeur Sanders was the rookie everyone insisted needed time, wasn't ready, or wasn't practicing well enough. The next moment, those same voices were scrambling to rewrite their own takes. Suddenly, he wasn't raw or unprepared. He was poised, he was accurate, he was a leader. And the people who once questioned his entire NFL future were calling his performance outstanding. It wasn't subtle. It was a flip so dramatic that fans immediately noticed. When ESPN's own analysts started saying things like, all this kid needed was game reps, and they should have had him playing from week one, it exposed just how performative the earlier criticism had been. Because nothing about his talent suddenly changed. His arm didn't magically improve overnight. His leadership didn't appear out of thin air. The only thing that changed was that people were finally forced to watch him play, instead of relying on whispers. For weeks, insiders pushed the idea that Shador was behind everyone, behind Gabriel, behind Flacco, behind Pickett. But the minute he stepped on the field, that narrative crumbled. He didn't look hesitant, he didn't look overwhelmed. He looked like the one person on the offense who actually understood the moment. And that terrified the people who had spent months doubting him. Because once Shador started completing those pinpoint throws, hitting tight windows, and directing traffic like a veteran, the excuses became impossible to repeat. The people who swore he wasn't ready suddenly had to confront the possibility that they weren't evaluating him honestly. They were repeating someone else's script. That's why the praise felt less like admiration and more like panic. They weren't impressed that Shador succeeded. For weeks, insiders pushed the idea that Shador was behind everyone, behind Gabriel, behind Flacco, behind Pickett. But the minute he stepped on the field, that narrative crumbled. He didn't look hesitant. He didn't look overwhelmed. He looked like the one person on the offense who actually understood the moment. And that terrified the people who had spent months doubting him. Because once Shador started completing those pinpoint throws, hitting tight windows, and directing traffic like a veteran, the excuses became impossible to repeat. The people who swore he wasn't ready suddenly had to confront the possibility that they weren't evaluating him honestly. They were repeating someone else's script. That's why the praise felt less like admiration and more like panic. They weren't impressed that Shador succeeded. But the second Shador actually stepped into the spotlight, the truth poured out from the people who matter most, his teammates. and their version of Shedeur couldn't have been more different. Players described him as someone who brings energy into the room every single day, shaking hands, cracking jokes, lifting spirits, and treating veterans with the same respect he gives rookies. They talked about his consistency, his confidence, and the way he walks into the building already prepared to work. One teammate even said he sees Shedeur in the office every morning, watching film with the coaching staff, asking questions, studying tendencies, and absorbing everything he can. That doesn't sound like someone who's disengaged. That doesn't sound like someone who's not ready. That sounds like a quarterback who was preparing for his moment long before he ever got it. Even more telling, teammates repeatedly pointed to the qualities coaches supposedly didn't see: poise, leadership, and the ability to stay calm after mistakes. They didn't describe a diva. They didn't describe an entitled rookie. They described someone who's built to lead grown men on Sundays. And that exposes a massive problem. If the locker room loved him, if the work ethic was obvious, if the leadership was real, then where did the negative stories come from? Because clearly, those narratives weren't coming from inside the team. They were coming from somewhere else. Possibly from voices who had more interest in shaping a storyline than reporting the truth. The disconnect became even clearer when veterans publicly praised his ability to take coaching, adjust mid-game, and bounce back after bad plays, qualities many rookies struggle with. They highlighted his willingness to learn, his presence in the huddle, and his commitment to mastering the entire offensive system. In other words, Shedeur wasn't just liked, he was respected, he was trusted, he was ready. Which raises the question fans can't stop asking. If his teammates saw all of this from day one, why didn't certain insiders report it? Because once the locker room truth came out, it didn't just undermine the rumors. It challenged the entire narrative surrounding Shedeur's early months in Cleveland. If Shedeur's teammates cracked the door open, the media practically kicked it off the hinges. Because the minute he delivered a breakout performance, all the carefully crafted narratives about his lack of readiness and falling behind in development suddenly didn't just look wrong, they looked manufactured. For months, fans were told to trust certain reporters, trust the sources, trust the insiders, who insisted they knew exactly what was happening behind closed doors. And yet, the instant Shedeur proved himself, those same insiders began quietly backpedaling. Some even admitted, publicly, that they had been repeating information fed directly from the Browns. No verification, no personal evaluation, no independent thought. Just echoing whatever the organization wanted out there. One analyst admitted he ate up everything the Browns told him, then turned around and fed it to the public like it was hard truth. Another insisted Shedeur couldn't do anything right, only to later confess he didn't actually see the practices that supposedly proved it. And the loudest critic of all, the one who painted Shedeur as an unliked outsider, went completely silent the moment teammates contradicted him. That's not journalism. That's narrative building. Instead of questioning why a rookie with elite college production was buried on the depth chart, they treated the organization's version of events as gospel. Instead of asking why the QB tracker numbers showed Shedeur outperforming veterans, they questioned the numbers, not the contradictions. Instead of investigating whether internal agendas were influencing the story, they became extensions of that agenda. But once Shedeur stepped onto the field, those narratives became impossible to defend. Because if he truly wasn't ready, how did he look better than the quarterback supposedly ahead of him? If he couldn't process defenses, why did his reads look sharper than players with years of NFL experience? If he wasn't respected, why did his teammates praise him so openly and so consistently? The answer is simple. The narrative was never about his ability. It was about control. When insiders push a story that collapses the second it meets reality, It reveals something bigger than a bad take. It exposes how easily misinformation spreads when nobody questions the source. And once those cracks appeared, fans began connecting the dots themselves, leading to a far bigger revelation. Cleveland's narrative wasn't just wrong, it might have been coordinated. When narratives fall apart, numbers become the loudest truth tellers. And in Shedeur Sanders' case, the numbers weren't just good, they were undeniable. For months, critics insisted he wasn't ready, wasn't accurate enough, and couldn't process NFL defenses. But the moment he finally got meaningful snaps, the stats told a story that made every one of those claims look embarrassingly outdated. Start with the basics: 364 passing yards in his third career start. That number alone puts him in rare company. Since the merger, only one other quarterback has ever thrown for exactly 364 yards in their third start: Tom Brady. And when you're being mentioned alongside Brady before you've even played a full season, it's hard to argue you're not NFL ready. But it didn't stop there. Shador became one of only two quarterbacks in the entire Super Bowl era to record 350-plus passing yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 1 rushing touchdown in a single game. The other quarterback to do it? Joe Burrow. These aren't empty numbers. These are historical benchmarks. Then comes the context, the part critics tried their hardest to ignore. Shador didn't put up those numbers behind a clean pocket or a top-tier offensive line. He played behind 3 backup linemen, including a center who left the game injured, and a right side of the line that had been graded near the bottom of the entire league. Despite that, he faced a 63% pressure rate, the highest any quarterback had dealt with all season at that point. Yet he still delivered, still made tight window throws, still hit receivers in stride, still controlled the offense like a veteran. Even the nerd stats confirmed what fans already saw with their own eyes. His EPA per play ranked above established names, not buried with struggling rookies. His PFF grade reflected high-level decision-making and precision. His adjusted completion percentage showed elite accuracy even when facing relentless pressure. And here's the part that shook critics the most. If Shador put up those numbers with backups, chaos, and pressure all around him, what does he look like with stability? With experience? With a team that actually built around him? The numbers didn't just silence doubts, they exposed how hollow those doubts were in the first place. Because once the stats came out, the old narrative didn't just look wrong, it looked intentional. The more you look at how Shador's early months in Cleveland unfolded, the harder it becomes to believe the narrative happened by accident. Too many storylines appeared out of thin air. Too many insiders repeated the same talking points. Too many contradictions piled up for everything to simply be a misunderstanding. And that's why so many fans, and even some analysts, began using the word that the Browns media desperately avoided for months: agenda. Now, to be clear, no one can say with certainty what was happening behind closed doors, but the patterns are hard to ignore. The moment the Browns drafted Shador, decisions were made that didn't align with his talent. He was buried at 4th string, behind veterans who weren't outperforming him. He ran scout team reps even when the QB tracker showed he was throwing better than the supposed starter. And despite entering the NFL with one of the best college resumes in the 2025 class, he was treated like a long-term project instead of a quarterback capable of competing. Rumors suggest several possible motives. Some insiders believe the Browns wanted to avoid controversy by propping up veterans first, especially after heavy investments in players like Pickett. Others think the team hoped to tank quietly for a high 2026 draft pick without making it obvious. And there's also the possibility, raised by both reporters and fans, that certain coaches simply didn't want Shador to succeed too quickly, because it would expose how wrong their evaluations were. Speculation aside, here's what we do know. The negative narratives didn't match the evidence. The rumors didn't match the film, and the depth chart didn't match reality. When multiple reporters later admitted that they just believed what the Browns told them, it raised a far more uncomfortable possibility. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was messaging. And messaging only becomes necessary when the truth threatens the plan. Yet the reason the agenda failed is simple. Shedeur didn't buy into it. He didn't shrink when they placed him fourth string. He didn't pout when they tried to redshirt him. He didn't fold when they fed the media stories about his readiness. He kept studying, kept improving, kept waiting for the one thing the team couldn't control, an opportunity. And when that opportunity arrived, he didn't just play well. He played so well that the entire narrative structure collapsed on the spot. It's one thing to overlook a rookie. It's another for that rookie to expose the system that overlooked him. Every controversy, every rumor, every whispered agenda became irrelevant the moment Shedeur stepped onto the field and played real NFL football. Because in one afternoon, he did something no insider, no critic, and no narrative builder could stop. He showed the world the truth. This wasn't just a solid rookie outing. It wasn't a promising start. It was the kind of performance that forces an entire organization and an entire city to reevaluate everything they thought they knew. The ball came out of his hand with confidence. His reads were quick, decisive, and fearless. His touchdown throws weren't lucky breaks. They were calculated, high-difficulty darts placed exactly where only his receivers could reach them. And remember, he did all of this behind a crippled offensive line, 3 backups, a missing center, a right side that ranked near the bottom of the league, a pressure rate at 63%, the highest recorded for any quarterback that season. Under those conditions, most rookies crumble. Many veterans would too, but Shedeur didn't crumble. He elevated. He kept climbing the pocket, adjusting protections and firing passes with a level of poise that shouldn't be possible for someone in their third career start. Even when he made mistakes, he responded the way elite quarterbacks do, not by shrinking, but by attacking. His teammates felt it, the crowd felt it, and the media, whether they liked it or not, felt it too. Because once the game ended and the stats went public, the narrative didn't just shift, it imploded. People who once said he wasn't ready were suddenly praising his accuracy. Analysts who doubted his processing were now highlighting his anticipation. Reporters who claimed he lacked leadership watched his team rally behind him in real time. And most revealing of all, the insiders who pushed those early doubts began walking them back quickly. Some admitted they misunderstood him. Others admitted they relied too heavily on what the Browns told them. A few even admitted they underestimated him completely. But the biggest truth was impossible to deny. Shedeur Sanders didn't just win a game. He exposed a system that tried to limit him. He proved the whispers wrong. He proved the depth chart wrong. He proved the agenda wrong. And once a rookie has the power to expose the truth on a national stage, nothing inside that building stays the same. Shedeur's breakout didn't just shift the conversation. It backed the entire Cleveland Browns organization into a corner they spent months trying to avoid. Because when a rookie you tried to bury suddenly outperforms your veterans, outshines your narratives, and outgrows the box you tried to keep him in, there's no going back to the old script. The truth becomes too big, too loud, and too undeniable to ignore. Now the Browns face a dilemma far more complicated than choosing a starting quarterback. They're facing a credibility crisis. Fans watched the team dismiss the QB tracker numbers that showed Shedeur outperforming everyone in camp. They watched insiders push talking points that never matched the eye test. They watched the organization cling to a storyline that fell apart the moment Shedeur touched the field. And now that the masks are off, the fans are asking the one question the Browns hoped they'd never have to answer. If they were wrong about this, what else are they wrong about? That uncertainty creates tension, not just between fans and media, but within the building itself. On one side, ownership seems enthusiastic about the Sanders family, publicly supportive and invested in the future. On the other side, the coaching staff's decisions painted a different picture entirely. Hesitation, reluctance, and a stubborn commitment to their own evaluations, even when reality contradicted them. And now, after Shador proved he can elevate an offense filled with backups, the Browns can't hide behind excuses anymore. They can't claim he needs more time. They can't blame preseason mistakes. They can't point fingers at his personality or maturity. All that's left is the simple truth. He's their best quarterback, their most composed quarterback, their most impactful quarterback. And he's only just getting started. But here's where things get even more interesting. Shador now has something more valuable than opportunity: leverage. Every snap he takes strengthens his position. Every game he commands reshapes how the franchise must build around him. Every narrative he destroys gives him more influence than the staff ever intended to give a rookie. The Browns didn't plan for this. They wanted time, control, and a quiet transition. Instead, they got a quarterback who forced an overdue conversation about their decision-making, their transparency, and their internal conflicts. Because once a rookie exposes the truth, the organization has only two options: embrace him completely, or risk exposing themselves even further. When you step back and look at everything that unfolded, from the buried depth chart position, to the questionable media narratives, to the sudden flip in tone the moment Shedeur Sanders touched the field, one reality becomes impossible to deny. Shador didn't just earn respect, he exposed the truth. For months, fans were told to lower their expectations. They were told Shador wasn't ready, wasn't developing fast enough, wasn't respected in the locker room, and wasn't close to being the quarterback of Cleveland's future. Those weren't small claims. Those were defining narratives. Narratives repeated by insiders, amplified by local radio, and protected by people who claim to have inside information. But the second Shador finally got the opportunity he'd been preparing for, those narratives didn't just shift, they collapsed. Completely, instantly, publicly. Because the truth doesn't need a PR campaign. It doesn't need insiders. It doesn't need rumors. It just needs a moment. And when that moment arrived, Shador showed exactly why those narratives never matched his reality. He showed command in the huddle, accuracy under pressure, confidence when the pocket collapsed, and leadership that couldn't be dismissed as rookie energy. He didn't just play well, he played well enough to force critics to expose their own contradictions. Teammates revealed the truth the media ignored. Stats revealed the truth the narratives tried to bury. And Shador revealed the truth that the organization didn't seem ready to confront.